Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Talbot. I'm Managing Director and Head of Research here at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host another Red Cloud webinar on uranium today. We are going to hear from Premier American Uranium CEO Colin Healey. Now, during today's webinar, he will provide an overview and outlook, and then we'll take some questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can. But before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During this Premium American webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to its forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 and 3 of the corporate presentation, and that can be found on the company's website, premierur.com. For Red Cloud Securities, I'd highlight this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation or buy or sell securities. We note this call does not consider the particular needs or situation of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. So please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on Premium American Uranium. So with that said, why don't I turn the floor over to Colin to speak about the company.
Well, thanks a lot, Dave. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be telling the Premier American Uranium story. As most viewers might know, Premier was originally started trading in December of 2023. We were spun out of Consolidated Uranium prior to that company being acquired by ISO Energy. And Premier was really set up to continue to carry out the legacy of a consolidation strategy. So the three pillars that really underlie this company are the acquire, explore, develop principles. And, to that end, we just recently completed our first acquisition of American Future Fuel, adding a strategic asset in New Mexico called the Sebieta project. And, we're going to jump to each of the projects and what we're doing this year. But, first I'd like to show you a company snapshot here of the cap table, because it's a pretty important cap table. You'll see that 48% of our stock, and this is all fully integrating the acquisition of American Future Fuel. See that 48% of our stock is in the hands of some sticky and supportive shareholders. We've got Sachem Cove at 31%, ISO Energy at 9%, Mega at 4%, Noncore at 4%. Now, these shareholders, particularly Sachem, ISO, and Mega, have been very, very supportive, and it's one of the reasons that this is a very compelling platform for me to join. A little bit of background: I was a uranium analyst working for a broker in Vancouver for the last 16 years prior to my joining Premier American Uranium in March. And one of the things that attracted me the most to this company was the fact that it had the shareholders behind it. Sachem Cove, extremely early to the uranium trade and thesis. They were out staking ground back in 2018 in Wyoming. Some of our assets in Wyoming came out of their hands. We were populated with some assets from Consolidated Uranium in Colorado. We were populated with some assets from that Sachem Cove had staked in 2018, and we retained a lot of the horsepower behind those companies to conduct this consolidation strategy going forward. So very excited. You can see we have some research coverage, including Dave, and we very much appreciate that. I've known Dave for a long, long time and have a huge amount of respect for the work that he does and his knowledge in the uranium space. Why the U.S.? So we're carrying out a consolidation strategy and specifically focused on the U.S. And in the last 18 months, we've seen an incredible resurgence in U.S. uranium positive news with bipartisan support. The COP28 conference at the end of 2023, we saw 22 countries, including the U.S., commit to triple nuclear power by 2050 to meet climate goals. And, this is extremely bullish. The uranium market is undersupplied as we speak. To meet those goals, we're going to need a substantial amount of new uranium production. We think the U.S. is going to play a critical role there because the news that we're hearing and the things that we're seeing are a strong indicator that the U.S. is committed to building out its nuclear fuel supply chain from end to end, and that's going to include uranium mining. Just recently, we saw the low enriched uranium RFP come out of the DOE. I think it's capped at about 3.4 billion, but that's to shore up the holdings of low enriched uranium to help utilities that are falling under this Russian low enriched uranium import ban find the material that they need to avoid using waivers as a method to continue to import enriched uranium from Russia. So, and we're seeing bipartisan support across the curve. So we're extremely bullish about the U.S. and uranium, and we think we're at a real tipping point. And we're seeing that in the news flow day after day, more and more support for the nuclear fuel supply chain and the U.S.'s commitment to regain leadership in nuclear power. So moving on to Premier, our assets, we're with the acquisition of American Future Fuel, we're now in 3 of the most prolific uranium mining jurisdictions in the U.S. American Future Fuel had an asset that our technical team identified as one of the most interesting and attractive in the U.S. for undeveloped projects, and it's in the Grants Mineral Belt. The project's called Sabieta. The Grants Mineral Belt itself, or New Mexico, produced over 347 million pounds of uranium historically, 4th largest uranium district in the world. We also have a project in Wyoming that I mentioned earlier called Cyclone. It's an ISR target just about 10 miles, 12 miles west of Ur-Energy's Lost Creek deposit. 230 million pounds of historic production out of Wyoming. An extremely strong jurisdiction. It's an agreement state, which has been proven to really help facilitate the permitting process with a few different new processing facilities being built and commissioned in the last kind of decade, 10 to 12 years. And then some of our secondary projects in Colorado, we've got 4 projects in the Uravan Mineral Belt that we're going to direct resources to in 2025 and 2026. But the main thrust of the company in 2024 and 2025 is going to be New Mexico and Wyoming. So the Sabieta project in New Mexico, this is a project where it was being drilled by American Future Fuel with the strategy to prove up the historic database. It had an 18.9 million pound historic resource on the project, and they conducted phase 1 drilling prior to our acquisition, and that phase 1 drilling meant that in an acquisition scenario, we were required to update the technical report on the project from the prior iteration. And with that process, we were able to, and they were able to show extremely strong correlation between the historic drilling and with the confirmation drilling and the existing database of historic drilling. And with that confirmation, they were able to, the QP, the qualified person preparing the 43101 technical report, was able to integrate the entire historic database minus that little area called Willie P. You'll see on the left-hand side of the polygon there. And that is an area where we plan to do some drilling and add additional resource. But the main point is that because the drilling reconciled so well in phase 1, we were able to leapfrog ahead about 18 months on this project and deliver a current resource of 23.5 million pounds, 80% in the indicated category, all prior to closing of the acquisition. So original strategy, probably had that historic resource brought current in first half of 2025. Reality, we've got that done. We've got 23.5 million pounds, a large increase over the historic of 18.9 million. And now the shift is toward exploration and expansion drilling. Now, with the caveat that we do plan to be drilling here in 2024, but we have a Type 3 permit on the application and process on this asset. That Type 3 permit was filed in March by American Future Fuel, and it really it's a low disturbance permit, and it was applied for with the plan to carry out phase 2 confirmation drilling. Now, the fact is we no longer have to do that. We've got the current resource. So we need a larger Type 4 permit to really attack this thing the way that we want to and be aggressive in terms of expansion and extension drilling. But under the phase Type 3 permit that's been applied for in March, that we're in the process of getting, we're going to go out and be able to do a couple of things even though it's a low disturbance permit in 2024, our expectation is we're going to drill somewhere between 5 and 10 holes. And we need to do some holes no matter what to that the QP wants to establish disequilibrium, which is a technical concept that is going to be required for an eventual preliminary economic assessment, which right now we think we can deliver in the second half of 2025. So the Type 3 permit, there's some work that we can do. We don't have to do all the work under the phase 2 drilling that was originally planned. So we're going to save a lot of money and be able to go out and get aggressive in 2025 on this. But we will be drilling in later 2024 to get some of those core holes in there that can give us the data that we need to prove disequilibrium. And we think that we can modify the permit, the Type 3 permit that we have, to do a few exploration holes and start to look at the expansion potential of the resource. So it's going to be a productive 2024. And in parallel, we're going to start the application process for the Type 4 permit. It's probably about a 12-month process, but we're going to start the application process for that Type 4 permit so that we can get very, very aggressive drilling this in 2025. And that drilling, the fact that we've got the resource already in the bag and that we can go out and drill it for expansion, I think is going to be much more impactful for the stock and for the project. So plan is in 2025, when we're doing some of that more aggressive exploration drilling, wrap all that up towards year end into a preliminary economic assessment and start to demonstrate the potential economics of this project. So, as far as the exploration drilling goes and how we can get aggressive with this thing in 2025, there's a Willie P area, which I'm just going to jump back to show you that Willie P area. We didn't have Willie P is just try this tool, is right here. Now that area, we didn't have in the totally complete data set for the historic drilling. So it wasn't included in the existing, in the new and current 43-101 resource, but there is great potential there for it to add additional resource. So that's probably the lowest hanging fruit in terms of resource upside, is bringing that Willie P area into the main resource estimate. So we'll do some drilling there. Mineralization for Sebieta, open on trend. We've got mineralization mapped along the deposits, showing that there's expansion potential. So we'll drill out the extents to add pounds, and we'll go and drill between some of the deposits where we've mapped them to be connected. And I think that we're going to find that we're able to add pounds in between the deposit areas as well. There's also some untested targets. I think that, we want to be efficient when we drill and explore. So we're going to go out and drill the areas where we think not only is there a high probability of adding some pounds, but also that it would be augmentative to the existing resource, especially when wrapped together in a preliminary economic assessment. So we're going to be smart about it and spend our money as wisely as possible, build that resource, and then try to wrap it into economics by the end of 2025. Now, the Westwater Canyon member, it's worth mentioning. I'll just jump back again to show you the Jackpile Paguade mine. So our asset being inside this polygon here, and then the Jackpile Paguade mine being inside this ellipse here. Our deposits are considered to be the geologic extension of this mineralization, but all of the mineralization in the Jackpile Paguade mine, which produced over 95 million pounds of uranium, was hosted in the Westwater Canyon member, which in this illustration, you can see the Jackpile Paguade mineralization hosts greater than 400 million pounds within the Westwater Canyon member. It's interpreted to occur underneath our deposits. All of our deposits at Sebieta are contained within the Jackpile sandstone, but deeper, there's some evidence that mineralization within that Westwater Canyon member continues or exists underneath our deposits. So with some of our drilling, we're gonna push holes deeper and look for some of that blue sky potential at depth. So a whole bunch of different angles for adding pounds at Sebieta. That's pretty much the strategy that we'll be working in 2024 and 2025 at Sebieta. I should mention that Sabieta is on private lands within New Mexico. That will be a huge advantage when we're looking at permitting and development scenarios. We think that the most likely development scenario that we're going to test as far as processing goes is on-site heap leach. There's some work to be done to prove that up, some metallurgy, as I said, some borehole geophysics data that we need to acquire or that we need to collect. But we believe that is a realistic scenario for future exploitation. So being on private lands in New Mexico, big advantage, fewer indigenous issues and resistance, and the ability to permit should be enhanced. Now, the cyclone, just jumping over to the cyclone project in Wyoming, extremely interesting looking target here. And we've just started drilling this on July 12th. And so we're in the process of the drill is turning, and we have a plan here to go and drill about 35 holes in this rim target area on the left, and another 36 holes at Osborne Draw target on the right. Now, with this drill program in concept is going to be split between 2024 and 2025. We have a drill window of July 1st until October, the end of October, weather permitting. So with a single drill rig program that we're running here, we think we can get all 35 holes into the rim target, and then potentially move over and depending on the weather, get a few holes into the Osborne Draw target. But the background here is there was about 88 holes drilled. It shows 80 on the slide, but we believe the number in the technical report is 88 known. It drilled in 2007, 2008. In 2022, we flew airborne geophysics on the property, integrated that into a technical report on the project that established this in the second sub bullet here. You see a target range of 7.9 million pounds to 12.6 million pounds of uranium at 0.06%. So that was the conclusion of a 2023 NI 43-101 technical report that we had conducted on the property that outlined this exploration target range. So what we're doing on the ground right now with this first drill program is starting to see to try to locate the uranium and start to delineate a resource there. And so we'll be disseminating news as we receive it. As the drill program progresses, but we're very excited to be drilling, and things are going smoothly so far. But it's we're only 10 days in, so we're looking forward to having news around the results of that program. I think that some of these historic drill holes really tell a lot about the potential. We've got historically drilled 8 feet at 0.092%, 7.5 feet at 0.081%. As I mentioned earlier, we're about 12 miles to the west of Ur-Energy's Lost Creek deposit. They've been mining there for some time. To the end of December 2023, they produced almost 3 million pounds of uranium at a process grade of 0.049%. So we're out there with a resource target of 7.9 to 12.6 million pounds at a target grade of 0.06%. If we can delineate a resource in that range at that grade, this would look like an extremely attractive satellite to any existing processing facility within range. Our strategy is broader. Remember, the first pillar of Premier American Uranium is acquire. We're going to be very, very careful about what we acquire, but things that augment our existing project portfolio would be the first priority. Building our own hub and spoke strategy, as others have done successfully in Wyoming and in Texas. But for us, Wyoming is the way that we unlock maximum value for this project. So step one, prove up the resource. In parallel, look for acquisitions that would be complementary to a potential hub and spoke strategy in Wyoming for ISR. I think that's how you get to start to really add torque to the story. I think that if we can define a resource in the midpoint of the range of the target range from the technical report at those grades, I think you've got yourself a potentially economic operation. But you really add torque with the assembly of additional satellites to a main deposit. So that'll be a big part of the acquisition strategy for Cyclone. And yeah, sorry, I should also say, so we expect to get about 35 holes punched in Cyclone on the rim target on the left here in 2024. And then and hopefully by the end of this drilling season, we've completed all 35. We think we might be able to get over to Osborne Draw and start to drill a few of those 36 holes that we have planned. So many of those are going to be part of the 2025 drilling when we recommence next summer. But depending on how efficiently we can drill, and drilling can be a very dynamic process, but we think we might have a chance at getting some holes into the Osborne Draw target this year as well. The budget for the project, this is an all-in budget. This includes our drilling costs are under $30 a foot, but our all-in budget of US $2.3 million, that covers 2024 and 2025. And we think that we'll be able to, it's an all-in budget. It includes everything that we plan to spend on the project, including the drill program. So we think we're going to be able to deliver some good news flow for that amount of money. And I didn't mention it on an earlier slide, but post-transaction, prior to close, we were about $12.5 million of combined cash Canadian. A bunch of that money will be spent on some of the closing costs, but we still have we're still well funded for these 2024 plans, including the drill program that we're currently running in Wyoming and the planned drill program in New Mexico later this year. And this slide is just simply reminding viewers about the consolidation strategy, which is really embedded in our DNA. Mega Uranium, 4% shareholder, as I mentioned, they conducted this strategy in 05, 06 with really great returns for shareholders. Consolidated Uranium was kind of the same legacy, extremely good, strong returns for shareholders from 2020 to 2023. Before being acquired by ISO Energy, they spun us out. And it's been a very, very successful strategy in different uranium cycles. As I mentioned, 31% shareholder, Sachem Cove. Sachem Cove was co-founded by Tim Rotolo and Mike Alkin. And these guys vended in a company called Premier Uranium, which they had used to stake the Cyclone deposit in Wyoming. Tim Rotolo was CEO. When they hired me, he stepped into the chairman role. Marty Tunney, Chief Operating Officer of ISO Energy, fantastic resource, was instrumental in the past consolidation work. Myself as CEO, Dave Suda, American Future Fuel, President and CEO, has joined us as president. We've got Phil Williams, who was CEO of Consolidated Uranium. When they were acquired by ISO Energy, he became CEO of ISO Energy. He's one of our advisors, and extreme depth of knowledge and successful execution of a similar consolidation strategy. We've got a really strong board overall, including the nominees from American Future Fuel. They nominated, and we've added Michael Henriksen, but also John Indahl, who's an extremely tenured lawyer in New Mexico, very, very well connected, extremely strong depth of knowledge in the legal and permitting aspects of operating in New Mexico and throughout the U.S. So really, really strong addition there, and very excited to have John. On the technical side, these are the guys that we're relying on, particularly for the acquire portion of our strategy. These guys have worked these projects in areas for decades. Ted Wilton, we acquired American Future Fuel specifically targeting the Sabieta asset. Ted Wilton wrote the prior technical report on Sabieta that we replaced with the new and current resource. So, we were able to lean on him extensively to identify the best project in New Mexico that to acquire, and these guys are helping us to continue to identify the best projects, and there's no replacement for that kind of experience. It's hard to find an asset or a piece of ground that they haven't touched in that area of the world, and it's a really good advantage. And then from a regulatory and affairs perspective, we've got a strong team who's been successful in moving forward permits. We've got JJ Brown running the exploration program at Cyclone for us, and Mike Thompson is a geologist who ran the phase 1 drilling for American Future Fuel at Sabieta and continues to work with us on the Sabieta project. So we have all the pieces in place to continue to be successful. This slide is a bit of a wrap. It just shows some of the accomplishments that I've already been over. The spin out in 2023, a premiere from Consolidated, the money that they raised in the initial funding. But in 2024, the completion of the acquisition of American Future Fuel, a private placement for $5.8 million as part of a subscription receipt for that. For that deal, augmented the board with the addition of John Indel and Mike Henriksen, and we've kicked off that summer exploration program at Cyclone. So it's going to be an exciting 2024 for us. 2 drill programs, one in New Mexico, one in Wyoming, should be generating news flow. Aggressive plans for 2025 at Sabieta, which has really emerged as the flagship project now that we have a current resource of 23.5 million pounds. Big jump from the 18.9 million historic. So really feel like things are firing on all cylinders. And the most interesting and unknown piece I think right now is the portfolio building M&A. So that as I said, it's a main pillar. It's a consolidation strategy, but we're going to be as careful as possible. As uranium prices go up, it gets more difficult or things start to get more expensive and more competitive. And we're going to be very careful to acquire things that only complement our portfolio. So I think that is more or less the company and where we're headed this year and next. Dave?
Great. Okay. Thank you very much there, Colin. It was a great presentation, informative as always. So now we are going to kick off the Q&A portion of the webinar. So a reminder to everybody online, please type your questions into the chat box and we will get to as many as we can. So Colin, we've already got a few questions here, and I guess let's start off with politics, because I'm sure we've been watching the TV all weekend. So, with it more likely that Biden would back out over the last couple of weeks, had you been getting any questions about Republican commitment to the nuclear sector? I think it's only been about 4 years since they were last in power, but I think people forget that really the Republican Party had always been very supportive of nuclear, and they were the ones that kicked off Section 232 that really culminated in the uranium import ban from Russia. So maybe do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I sure do. I mean, definitely the Republicans were more constructive. I felt initially with respect to the uranium space, but lately, with the ban on Russian on low enriched uranium from Russia, and some other legislation that's moved forward with really strong bipartisan support, I think that we're seeing full recognition from both sides of the line that the only way to meet climate goals for the U.S. and globally is to have nuclear as a major component. There's no other as reliable baseload power source as nuclear that is emission free, in my opinion. And it's with the new technologies that are emerging, including in Gen 4 reactors, SMRs, all with we have a historically extremely safe operating record for nuclear reactors from Gen 3 and before, but with the new generation of reactors being tested, I mean, I don't see how you're not going to see continued strong bipartisan support for nuclear. So, I think the Republicans are already there, but I think the Democrats are getting there really, really quickly. And I'm looking forward to either government. A lot of the things that have happened in the last 24 months have happened with a Democratic president. it's been very effective. So I think it's going to be a great environment to operate in the U.S.
Excellent. Good. And you are a newly listed company, but really you're not new to the business. You've been around as long as I have, probably 17, 18 years or so, at least in the uranium space. And your team has extensive experience in uranium as well. Perhaps tell us what you, Sachem Cove, ISO Energy all bring to the table as far as being able to grow this company.
I think from my perspective, or for me personally, for the viewers, I spent 16 years as a uranium analyst in a role similar to Dave with another brokerage. And, over time, and especially in the last 4 or 5 years, let's say the last 2.5 years, there've been a lot of interest from various smaller companies looking to pull guys over the fence to run uranium companies who had some experience and some knowledge in the space. And until I found interest with this group, I wasn't interested in making that move. But the most compelling part of this move for me is this team that's behind it. Sachem Cove was out staking ground in 2018 when I was first talking to them as an analyst, and there was only a few of us saying constructive things about uranium at that time. And we kind of knew that there was a supply shortfall building, but nobody seemed to care. And inventory was a bit of a black box. Nobody knew for sure where things stand. We knew that when a producer went out to buy back uranium in the spot market, they could get it. And sometimes the price even went down when they were buying big volumes. So it's really hard to read. Was that desperation selling? What was it? But the point is, with this company, I felt like I was aligned with some of the smartest people on all sides of the industry. So we've got the sophisticated hedge fund who does more work than most investors. Really digs deep into the uranium sector. So you've got those guys. You've got the geologic team and technical team with this who knows every asset in the area where we're trying to operate. You've got the operational and strategic guys who carried out this strategy through Mega, through Consolidated Uranium, and very successfully. So when you bring all those together, and what I bring to the table, I mean, you and I have probably visited almost every asset that in the U.S. of any interest. So we have a lot of background on what it takes to build an economic deposit and how to tell that story to the market and what steps you need to take to make things more interesting and attract financing. So I think when we bring all these pieces together for the group, it's an incredible team and package. And I think, we're really positioned for success. And that's why I decided to come over.
Yeah, I'd say that Sachem Cove probably digs deeper than most analysts even. They're very, very good at what they do. Is Premier anticipating further M&A activity in coming months or years?
Yeah, I mean, it's the first kind of pillar of our strategy. And for sure, we're just digesting this acquisition that we just closed at the end of June. But, we're 22 days into July and we're definitely looking. We want to be aggressive. We want to get things before they get too competitive. So we've definitely got our targets, and it's a question mark bullet as a catalyst, but it's something that investors should expect us to be moving on as one of our fundamental principles. So we will be hopefully in due course announcing other acquisitions.
Yeah, with prices rising here, are you finding it's becoming a little bit more difficult in this market to find things, or at least find things of value? And or does the background of your team allow you to go a little bit off the beaten path and find things that other companies aren't even aware that they exist?
Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, there's some fragmented ownership of some interesting land for sure in the U.S., and that's where our team with decades of experience down there can help us think about land assembly or acquiring things that are less well known. But I think that it definitely is getting more competitive, and that you have to be careful to find things that augment your existing portfolio. When you're paying, when you're paying market, if you have an asset that thing that you're acquiring complements, then you do get an accretive scenario. You might have a chance at some synergy. So for us, it's going to be careful portfolio building around the existing assets to make sure that we're adding value when we're paying in a competitive environment and prices are higher.
Right. Any pieces that you're missing right now? Do you need to add to your management team, technical team, or are you happy with what you've got?
No, I think we're extremely happy with the management and board. The way that we were able to get John Indall added to the board with the acquisition of American Future Fuel was great. That fills the hole and adds kind of unparalleled experience in the space. So we're excited to have him. But other than that, we've got a very, very strong board and advisors. And on the technical side, we've got project geologists at the two key projects being overseen by our senior geologist. And I think we're pretty well covered until we start to expand the portfolio. And then we'll probably reorganize a bit to make things efficient. But feels like we're about right now.
Right. Okay. Cebolleta. So tell us the importance of the Grants Mineral District in New Mexico.
Well, as I mentioned, within our project, there's about 4 million pounds of historic production. The Grants Mineral Belt, that historic production, there was a processing facility on just off our project to the west that processed some of the oro's that were mined historically. And then the other ores from the St. Anthony area at Cebolleta were sent to Church Rock. But, with 370 million pounds being produced in New Mexico, makes it the fourth largest historic uranium production jurisdiction in the world. And I think that's off a lot of people's radar. So, the Grants Mineral Belt, but also the state of New Mexico in general, extremely important to the historic production of uranium in the U.S. And we think that the way that the sentiment is shifting in the U.S., some of these historic jurisdictions where mineralization is already in place and deposits are known are going to also have a renaissance and become important sources of fueling the domestic reactor fleet. I mean, as well as I do that uranium production was, almost nothing in the past couple of years in the U.S. And that is not a position that the U.S. is comfortable with anymore. And I think that they're going to do whatever they can. From a larger perspective, it isn't going to be that expensive for the U.S. to promote this industry and support it. And there's a lot of different ways that they can do that in New Mexico and elsewhere. And it doesn't even have to be financial. There can be streamlined permitting processes, and there's a lot of administrative things that could be done to really help that. And I think that, as we lobby in Washington and talk to officials in government, those are the things that I'm stressing to try to move projects forward.
Mm. Yeah, and as far as permitting, we've got Wyoming, Texas, Utah, maybe a lesser extent Colorado, known for being able to permit uranium. How does New Mexico fare relative to the other U.S. jurisdictions?
Well, the agreement states that you mentioned certainly have a streamlined process, and what you get in Wyoming, you've got Lost Creek, you've got a couple of uranium assets that have been licensed in the last 10 to 12 years. So that really helps when you've had recent permits reviewed and approved. In New Mexico, it's going to be more traditional, more of a, it's going to involve the NRC and the New Mexico Energy Resources and Natural Energy Minerals and Natural Resources Division is the permitting group that you'd be primarily dealing with. But it would be a full federal and state permitting process that falls under a Type 6 permit, and we're looking at starting the environmental surveys and biological surveys required to support the beginning of that process, because I think that it's not extremely expensive to begin that process. So I think that when you're running a uranium company, you need to be showing that you're advancing towards production at some future date. And so everything that we can do in parallel to start that type 6 permit and start to move this thing forward down the permitting path really is going to provide us the information loop that we need to know what we have to do to eventually become permitted and develop the asset. So probably by the middle of next year, we'll have done some of the background work to start supporting that initial permit, and then we'll do that in parallel with everything that we do.
Okay, and that new resource you're talking about, 24 million pounds, total grades of probably combined 0.13. So good grade. Confirmation of this historical resource really came a lot quicker than anticipated. So what is your next step now? You just add more pounds, find new deposits? How do you move forward on this?
Yeah, having the phase 1 drilling accomplish everything that phase 1 and phase 2 drilling was supposed to accomplish, it probably leaped us forward, at least 12 months. When we first thought about the acquisition of American Future Fuel, it was phase 2 drilling. It was going to cost a couple $1 million. It was going to be more confirmation drilling. As well as I do, confirmation drilling is not the flashiest stuff. It either comes in like the historic database, or
I think you lost.
Sorry?
I lost. Oh, I apologize. My speakers went out. I thought you went mute. Forgive me. Carry on.
No problem. I guess the main thrust here is that we no longer have to do phase 2 drilling for confirmation. We've got the resource. That leaps us forward. We weren't planning on having that resource probably until the first half of 2025. So can we go out and get aggressive with drilling? That's the plan for 2025. We've got, and I'll explain real quick where we think we can add pounds. But the permit that had been applied for in March was that type 3 lower disturbance permit. We're going to do what we can under that permit because we're in the process of getting it. We weren't anticipating needing the type 4 permit until we completed the resource. So in 2024, under this type 3 permit, we're going to be able to go drill get some core holes in there that we need for disequilibrium. I know you'll understand. The QP wants to see, you'll read in the technical report that generally disequilibrium is not a problem in New Mexico, but they want to see the data, and fair enough, as they should. But with that, so we're going to get some drill holes in 2024 that will contribute to the ability to publish a PEA in 2025. So
okay, I was going to ask this question, and you've mentioned again disequilibrium. So maybe just perhaps mention to viewers what disequilibrium is, something that must be considered when you're dealing with sandstone.
Sure. So yeah, disequilibrium. When you use gamma probes to measure uranium rather than assays, which is where you send the core or the chips to a lab, and they actually remove the uranium contained within the core to give you a value or a percent U3O8. There's another tool. There's a couple of other tools out there, but a gamma probe will allow you to do EU3O8 or equivalent U3O8. And the gamma probe really detects the decay products of uranium. So depending on the age of a uranium deposit, the decay products may be representative of the uranium that's present, or they may not be extremely representative. And you have to send rock to the laboratory to have it assayed and compare that to your EU3O8 data to calibrate your gamma probe so that you can publish, or so that you can use that gamma probe effectively to measure your U3O8 contained in the deposit. So disequilibrium is the kind of the error that you're seeing in the gamma probe and the correction factor that you have to apply when you're estimating uranium content within the rock using a gamma probe. So that's quite an explanation, but it's kind of exactly what it is. Dave's even more scientific than I am, so he could explain to you if there's anything.
I think you nailed it.
Okay, and so it's very, very efficient to use a gamma probe to measure uranium when you're drilling holes. You can downhole probe and you can get U3O8 values really quickly. But you want to be accurate. And so one of the things that the QP, the qualified person who'd be preparing our PEA, and the guy from SLR who prepared the technical report with the resource, one of the things they wanted to see was this disequilibrium factor, so that when they interpret the gamma logs from the drilling, they can do it accurately and be sure that we're dealing with accurate U3O8 values. It's something that you absolutely have to establish. And so we'd be using money efficiently under this type 3 permit. Go drill 3 to 5 core holes to establish this equilibrium. But also we believe that through amendments of that low disturbance permit, that this year we'll be able to do some expansion and extension drilling that could add pounds. And I did touch on it during the presentation, but that Willie P area, that's an area that was not included in the resource because it's one of the few areas where we didn't have a totally complete drill data. So it was excluded from the resource estimate. But if we go in there and get a few verification holes drilled, we can start to think about adding those pounds in. So some expansion and extension drilling might be possible, but we really have to check and make sure that we can amend this type 3 permit to do those holes. So we will be drilling, but how much of it in 2024, but how much of it can be expansion and extension, that's TBD.
Okay. And then maybe what sort of scale do you need here before you get to the PEA stage and start considering economics?
Well, it's very early days and we haven't studied this. So all the possible caveats that you could put on something like that. But I think that, adding 3-4 million pounds, I think is possible based on my own personal opinion and the review of the data that I've seen. And I think that if you can prove the heap leach concept, you could, that we're probably already there. I think that obviously economics of anything like that improve with additional ore. If you're thinking about a 23.5 million pound deposit, if you're thinking about a 1.5 or 2 million pound a year operation, you're only getting 10 years of mine life. And anything up to about 18 years is gonna be augmentative in an MPV scenario. So, I mean, more pounds will definitely be better, but I think that we could show with a heap leach processing scenario that this would be economic at current uranium prices. But that is a big statement, and all the caveats that are possible around that, because we have not done the studies required to back that up. And a lot of work needs to be done to prove that, but more is better for sure. And it's very difficult to say at this point what the economics would look like until we study it. Like, we need to we know that these ores are amenable to processing. These ores were mined. Like I said, there's 4 million pounds of historic production from these deposits. They're processed in conventional mills. And so we know that, there's the uranium is extractable, but now we have to look at it from a heap leach perspective. That takes a lot of study. So TBD.
Right. Oh, okay. I'll let you study it before I keep asking questions
Thank
on
you.
that. So, good. So let's pivot over to Cyclone ISR project in Wyoming. Now, you're already in a district that is producing uranium via ISR. Maybe tell us a little bit why in situ recovery is often more preferable than, say, conventional operations.
Well, for sure. I mean, in situ always has that lower upfront capex hurdle, right? I mean, like, one of the more difficult, it's a conventional mining. It usually involves the construction of a processing plant, mill facility, more complicated permitting, satellite or ISR processing facilities are small footprint. The mine sites, I mean, some people don't even like to call them mine sites, but the injection recovery sites are extremely low disturbance. When the first time you go and look at ISR deposits being mined, it looks like brown fire hydrants, like, spread out all over the ground. It doesn't look like giant open pits or anything too daunting. And I think that, in this area of Wyoming, in the Great Divide Basin where we are, when Your Energy started up that plant, I think we were probably both analysts covering it at the time, but it was one of the best startups of a uranium production operation that I had seen, and it went extremely smoothly. The well field, and I guess there's some luck involved, but a great team there as well. But like the technical risk can be substantially addressed through pump testing and a lot of work that you can do ahead of time. And that can be more difficult to do. I mean, you can do all the work in the world on the benchtop, but until you get underground with underground development, it's just a different risk proposition than ISR. And ISR is quite attractive for that low upfront capex, that quick return to production once the well field's installed. And I guess that's why, from when I first started looking at uranium until now, we've seen mostly because of Kazakhstan, but we've seen a huge change in the mix of where uranium comes from and how it's mined. And ISR is taking a big part of that, big piece of that pie because of those reasons.
Yep. And I'd say that Lost Creek ISR plant in your backyard is still the Cadillac. And you know me, I'm a Cadillac guy. So
yeah.
So, yeah.
Nice.
8 to 13 million pound exploration target with the 88 drill holes that you think are already in there. Do you think you'll need much additional drilling to get to those levels?
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard to say. It's hard to say. It depends on how quickly we can vector in on mineralization, and then how, we'll be as efficient as possible. The principles of doing that are pretty well understood. But first we have to, without the absolute complete data set, because we don't have some of the, for legal reasons, it sits with another party that, and we'll work on gaining access to that data. The QP had some of that data, but it's not available to us. And so we're working to drill and kind of vector in on that mineralization, and how much work it's going to be is really also TBD. I mean, if we can get 35 holes in there, locate the uranium, that will really inform the 2025 strategy. Like we're going to drill 35 at Cyclone Rim in 2024. We're going to drill 36 at Osborne Draw in 2025. But depending on how the drilling's going and what we see, things can and should change if there's substantial areas where we should be focusing energy. So it's really hard to talk about what's going to happen in the next 12 months when you're doing exploration drilling and you don't have the entire information of the historic. This isn't the same exercise as Sebieta, where we're just going to prove up a historic database where we have all the information. This is a bit more exploration style. So locating the mineralization and then kind of drilling it at 400 feet, then 100 feet spacing is going to be a process. So it's hard to tell how many drill holes it's going to take until we get in there. And also a lot of that exploration target of 8 to 13 million pounds was based on that historic drill database that we don't have complete access to. But there's a very good chance that there's more mineralization outside that area. That tech report is underpinned by that historic drilling, and we've got the whole project to drill. So I'm pretty optimistic about it.
Okay, so timing of a resource estimate of Cyclone's a little bit more of a moving target.
Yeah, wait until we have some results back from the drilling, and then I'll let you know how I feel about that.
Sounds good. Okay. Coming up to the top of the hour here, Colin, so maybe last question. You do have a very strong backing with Sachem Cove and ISO, Mega, Encore, and a couple others. Do you have a plan to dilute your strategic shareholders? Not necessarily to get rid of them as investors, but really to perhaps help boost your company float, or improve the shares available from market, improve liquidity, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's probably a natural kind of scenario. I think that they'll continue to be supportive in future financings, as they showed during the subscription receipt, and that really gave us some ability to set price and protect our general shareholder base from undue dilution. But it does make sense to start when we go out to raise money to put as much money in sticky but expanding that shareholder base to a broader interested audience would probably help liquidity. That would be great. We're in the URNM because URNM, the ETF, held held Consolidated Uranium. So they got SpinCo shares of us. They kept us in. Our position in that ETF, should increase commensurate with our market cap as we make other acquisitions, and American Future Fuel. The URA rebalancing is coming up. We're on the list of companies that are under consideration, so there's a chance of being included in that ETF. That should improve liquidity, but for sure, liquidity is something that I think about. And if we can, in future financings, I mean, if we're carrying out this acquisition strategy the way that we want to, there's going to be financing so that we can carry out those other two pillars, right? We're here to explore and develop once we acquire. And when we do those financings, we'll be as careful as possible about putting it in the right hands that are going to be supportive, but also, increase the scope of all the investors so that we get some liquidity as well.
Great. Okay. Colin Healey from Premier American Uranium, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Dave. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for everybody else for tuning in. Our next webinar is tomorrow. That's Tuesday, July 23rd at 2 p.m. Eastern. Tim will sit down with Strategic Resources at that time. So have a great day, and thank you for supporting Red Cloud's webinar series.